How's it going, everyone? Venomous Stare here with the King of Funny, my special guest and sports expert, aka Benny. You can follow him on Twitter at PinkFloydBoy. We're going to be talking about the Texas Rangers, specifically their matchup with the Blue Jays in the ALDS. In 2015, the Rangers were defeated by the Blue Jays in Game 5. Now they look for revenge. Ben, what are your thoughts going into this series?
Well, obviously, I think it would have been a lot easier if the Rangers would have been matched with the Orioles, because I believe the Orioles pitching staff is a lot. This is a lot weaker than the Blue Jays, especially in starting pitching and in the bullpen. I mean, basically everywhere in pitching. All they have is a great offense, but it didn't happen. Blue Jays won. Blue Jays had more experience in the playoffs, which makes them even more dangerous than what the Orioles would have been. They beat us last year, obviously, when we were up 2-0, and they came back and won the last 3 games. I mean, heart-wrenching. That's why I have some anxiety as a Ranger fan when it comes to playing the Blue Jays. I watched that game, and it was exactly what I thought it would be. It was 3 home runs by the Blue Jays, and I think 1 or 2 by the Orioles. And it was just, both teams just slugged it out. And Tarcion hit a 3-run walk-off in the 11th. That's what the Blue Jays can do to you. And that crowd is fucking rowdy. They threw that beer at that Korean player in left
Yeah,
field.
Kim.
And yeah, I mean, Toronto fans are just kind of trashy in general. I just think of Deadmau5 just sitting there, just like in left field, just like playing Minecraft. Like, yeah, fuck Odor, like come on Odor, like just like fuck Blue Jay fans. I mean, I can't stand them. I mean, I know there's some rowdy Ranger ones, but goddamn, I mean, those Canadians are fucking obnoxious. But I don't know. I think it's gonna be a really good series. I mean, obviously with the Odor punch, it's going to be crazy to see how these two teams kind of handle their emotions. I mean, are they going to let it get to them, the pass, the bat flip, the punch, the brawl, is that going to, are they going to leave that behind, or are they going to kind of carry that with them? And it's going to be interesting to see which players do and don't do that. I mean, it's going to be, can Odor contain it? Can Bautista contain his ignorance? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. I think that's almost as interesting as to see how the series goes. I mean, I want to see the Rangers win, obviously, but I don't know. I think that's a really interesting aspect that we need to look at.
I think we should start with where the games are being played. Since the Rangers have the superior record, they have the home field advantage, which means they get 1, 2, and 5 at home. So I can't wait to hear how the crowd treats Jose Bautista and how roundly he's booed.
I mean, there's going to be some bad receptions for some players. I mean, there's some bad blood, and everyone wanted this. The last time the Rangers and the Blue Jays played was the infamous punch, from Odor, and that's why the Blue Jays thought it was kind of cowardly to hit Bautista on the last bat of the regular season, not knowing if we would match up in the playoffs. And ever since that incident, I mean, analysts, fans, I mean, everyone, probably players, they want to see this matchup of the Rangers and the Blue Jays, this rematch. And I mean, I can't. I mean, this is some. I think it's for baseball. It's going to be pretty good stuff.
So let's start with the pitching rotations because many people would agree that that's what wins playoff games. Game 1, it's probably going to be Cole Hamels for the Rangers, right?
It's Cole Hamels. Already announced Game 2 is Yu Darvish.
Right. So didn't Sanchez play in the the Baltimore start?
Yes.
So is it?
No, it was Stroman.
it
Stroman.
oh, it was Stroman. So they're going to have the top of their pitching rotation.
Stroman was the guy who beat us twice last year. He's also best friends with a rapper who's popular among like college kids named Mike Stud. They're like best fucking friends. So I mean, like Marcus Stroman's a pretty good player, and he has good energy. He feeds off the crowd in Toronto. J.A. Happ is 19-4 this season for
Yeah,
the Blue Jays.
ton of
It was
wins.
really interesting. It was really interesting to see John Givens start. Start. What's his name?
Sanchez,
What's the guy? No, not Sanchez. Stroman.
Stroman.
Okay, Stroman was like 9-8 with like an ERA of like 4. Like it wasn't really impressive stuff. And J.A. Happ's ERA is 3.27, 19-4. And John Givens starts Stroman, and Stroman pitched 6 innings, 2 runs. kept the Blue Jays in the game along with their bullpen in 5 innings who didn't allow a hit. 5 innings from the bullpen after Stroman, no hits for the Orioles. Absolutely great fucking shit. I mean, the Blue Jays looked the part of a playoff team, which I thought they would.
I think the Blue Jays bullpen is dangerous. They have Grilly, Francisco Liriano, former Ranger Scott Feldman. They have some arms out there for sure, and some arms that can go out for long periods of time. A lot of those players are former starters. So Happ versus Hamels. Happ, of course, is a former Houston Astro. He had a ton of wins this year, as you said. Who do you think has the...
Excuse me, it's not Hap on tomorrow. It's Estrada, who's 9-9, 3.48 ERA.
Oh, okay.
I believe it's the day, the next game, that it's Darvish versus Hap for game 2.
It's interesting that they wouldn't go with Happ. Is he... I mean, do you...
Actually, I'm sorry, Hap is 20-4, not 19-4.
Okay. Why do you think they're not going with Happ, Ben, to open the series?
I'm not really sure. It's kind of it's an interesting move strategically. I feel like a Hamels Hap matchup would make more sense since Estrada's 9-9 and Darvish is 7-5. Even though like Darvish recently has been pitching probably his best baseball for us in his career. I mean, he's had some dominating stuff pitching-wise in these past few months. So I don't really know why they're doing this, but maybe they're thinking if they can take down our number one ace and Cole Hamels in game 1 and can upset us at home, and then game 2 they'll have a guy who's 20-4 pitching for them, at a noon game. It'll be a 12 o'clock game, so it's an interesting move, but if they win game 1, we could be in danger because Darvish can be roughed up sometimes. I don't think he will, but there's cases where he doesn't float, and if there's a guy who's 20-4 pitching against us on the other side, we might be in some danger. So that's why I think this game 1 is even more pivotal than most game 1s. Obviously it matters because you don't want to play game 2 going down against a 20-4 JA Happ, but we'll have to see. Game 1 is going to be really interesting.
So who do you give the edge to? Cole Hamels?
I think Hamels. He's been kind of inconsistent in this season. He's still been good. He's been really good. But there's been times where he's just kind of fill out 3 to 4 runs. And if our offense can't get going, it could turn bad. Because if we're down 4-0 in the 7th or 6-4, the Blue Jays bullpen is almost as good as ours, I believe. If not better, but it's a pretty good bullpen. So I still give Hamels the edge because he is called Hollywood. He's the guy who comes out and pitches great in clutch situations. He's done this before with the Phillies for multiple seasons, and that's why the Rangers got him. And that's why it's just one of the other parts of why I think this is the best Ranger team any Ranger fan has ever seen, because we have Hamels, a true ace, a true fucking ace. There's no doubt he's the guy that you want picking up the ball when you need him, when you need to win the most. And to have Darvish pitching number 2 behind him, a guy who's just had dominating stuff throughout his career. He's had some injury problems, obviously, but when he's pitched and he's been healthy, he's been dominating. So our rotation, even though the 3 and 4 spot is a little shaky, our 3 and 4 spot was solid during the regular season. Martin Perez was inconsistent on the road, great at home. If he's pitching at home, I want Martin Perez, not at Toronto. I think Martin Perez would kill at Toronto.
Well, that's a great... I was going to bring that up because I think I agree. In game 1, I definitely give the edge to Hamels. The one thing I will mention is he's had some walk trouble this season. He's been top 5 in walks pretty much all year.
Yeah, he has.
And Martin has been up there with them. I think that's going to be a big issue with both of them because the Jays are a team with lots of power hitters, and one of the easiest ways to lose games against teams with lots of power hitters is to issue lots of walks because you can get behind very quickly when you do that. So I think if Hamels, as long as he doesn't walk a bunch of people, will win game one. And as far as game two goes, I want to talk about the potential that I think Martin Perez should be started at this game two at home, because he's been so much better at home than he's been on the road. What do you think?
I really hadn't thought about that until now, but you're right. I think that would be a better option because, like we both said, Martin Perez has been night and day difference on the road and at home. And I trust him a lot more at home in a completely packed stadium, feeding off that energy. He's pitched before in the playoffs. I mean, he has some experience. He's not a rookie. So I would feel more comfortable with him pitching game two, and then having, you Darvish in game three at Toronto. That would make me feel a lot much safer than maybe Kobe Lewis, or as I would think, I would prefer AJ Griffin.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting. So,
Kobe Lewis is a proven guy, but his last few starts and his past few months since trying to come back, he's not the Kobe Lewis that he was at the beginning of the season. Beginning of the season, he was dominant. He was pitching some of the best baseball he's ever pitched. But right now, in the forms they're in, I trust AJ Griffin to allow 2-3 runs over Kobe Lewis having a 6-run implosion in the third. Even though Kobe Lewis has been a proven player in the playoffs, his form right now it just scares me, even though he is experienced.
well, would you roll the dice with Derek Holland? He's also a guy who's playoff proven.
They haven't set the roster yet, which is they probably won't do it until the last few hours before the game. But there's talk that Holland won't even make the roster, the 25-man roster.
I'm aware of that talk, but I think he has to. I mean, he deserves to be in the bullpen. Come on. He deserves to be on the team more than some of those guys.
And the reason why is he's always been a starting pitcher. He's not in good form right now. He's not pitching good. He hasn't recently. He hasn't ever since he's come back from the injury. And he's not a bullpen player. Our bullpen is already stacked. Alex Claudio has been an unsung hero in our bullpen.
I agree.
Claudio deserves to be in our 25-man roster more than Derek Holland. And he probably will be as our long man. Which, that's been his role. It's hard for starting pitchers to be thrusted into a 7, 8, 9 extra innings relief pitcher role that they haven't done all season or their career.
Well, Holland has done it. Holland did it.
Not well. He hasn't done it well.
So you think
I would trust someone who's an actual bullpen player like Claudio. I mean, we have a stacked bullpen. I would trust AJ Griffin in that roster a lot more than Derek Holland. AJ Griffin's had really good games this year.
that's true? He's also had really bad games though too.
Better than Holland, who's just had straight bad.
Yeah, Holland's also. The thing is, I think you have to consider the history and the playoff experience. And I'm not saying put Holland in over Claudio or Griffin, but I think that maybe Diekman doesn't need to make the roster. He's had erratic control issues for a while now. And there's other names like potentially Hoying. I mean, would you rather have Holland than Hoying, considering the players are going to get rest?
No, Holland. Or no, excuse me, Hoying. I would rather have Hoying. At least he's got some speed. He's a decent player. I'd rather have some speed on the bench than Holland. Holland right now isn't offering anything. He's not starting well. I would not put a struggling starting pitcher into a bullpen role just so he can be on the roster. I don't think they're going to do it.
Okay. So let's shadow box game 3. Let's fully flesh out 2 first. So let's just assume they're not going to do the Perez at home thing. They're just going to make sure that Darvish will get his. The earlier you start a guy, the better chance he'll have of making more starts, obviously. So I really think they're kind of hesitant about doing the Darvish in game 3 because they wouldn't get to start him twice. Because potentially they could pull him out of the pen or start him on short rest if he starts game 2. But in game 2 at home, Darvish versus Happ. What do you think that one's going to look like?
I I feel like you Darvish, he hasn't really performed in the playoffs yet as he has in the regular season for the Rangers because he's either been injured or we haven't been in the playoffs for him. This is like one of the first experiences as a Ranger fan to watch you Darvish in like a clutch situation like the playoffs, and it'll be interesting because he's been dominant in the regular season, strikes out a ton of people, but sometimes he does allow 2, 3 runs. I mean, like just like a normal pitcher does. His ERA's in I think the low mid threes. So, I'm really scared about how our offense performs in these first 2 home games because there's times this season where the Rangers offense just goes straight cold. Our run differential was I think 8 runs above, which they say is honestly statistically incredible because it's crazy how many one-run games we've won. I mean, it's a season or it's an MLB record for a one-run record or one-run game record. They're like 51 and 17 or something like that. It's ridiculous. Like the Rangers' run differential is it's like +8. So I mean, it's not a team that like constantly rakes the ball. I mean, they have good players, but there's times where they get into a terrible cold spell, and I don't know if they're going to psych themselves out. I don't think they will. They have some experienced players, and I think they're on a mission. But I'm just full of baseball anxiety. Baseball postseason is the most erratic, unreliable, inconsistent thing in sports. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, in football, you can say, yeah, the Patriots are going to go to the playoffs and probably get to the second round like most times. Baseball, I mean, you're just like, what the hell? The Blue Jays just all of a sudden got good in the past 2 years, and like now they're like beating the Rangers again. Like that can happen. I mean, like baseball's a weird sport, and usually one seeds don't succeed. Usually it's like the wild card coming in and winning. I mean, like the Giants, how many times have they made the wild card in the NL and gone on to like win the entire NL and then win the World Series? They did it twice in the past 5 years. Once against the Rangers in 2010. I guess 6 years.
I think that Hap has the slight advantage in game two. Yu Darvish strikes out a lot of people, but I think overall Hap has had the better year.
Hap has, just because he's been healthy all year, and Darvish had some rough spots whenever he came back. But now, I saw an interview with his translator like a month ago that he thinks he's pitching the best. He literally said this is the best he's pitched in his life. I mean, he feels like this is like one of the best times in his life to pitch, and he feels like he's one of the best in the league. I mean, he's really confident in his ability. So I don't know. I mean, J.A. Happ might be more consistent just because he's been healthy. He's been on a roll. Like you said, he's been having a great year. It's incredible they didn't start him in this wild card game. I still can't believe that. But I think you're right. Happ might have a little bit of an advantage just because he's just been pitching all year. I think he's a little more grounded.
Okay, so how do you feel about game three? Obviously, at this point, the series moves to Toronto, and it will be Martin Perez pitching versus the Sanchez guy that strikes out a lot of people, right?
Yes.
Well, what do you think?
That's why I think these 2 home games we have to win because playing in Toronto scares me. Martin Perez on the road scares me, especially in a loud, rowdy crowd in that stadium. So I think it can get pretty. Game 3 might get a little out of hand on both sides. I feel like the Rangers score a lot of runs. And game 3 is going to be an exciting run-filled game, but I think it's going to be pretty sloppy on both ends as well. Because it's both pitchers that they're decent on occasions, but they can allow some pretty small bursts of runs through the early innings. I mean, Martin Perez is a ground ball pitcher, but all the ground balls he produces are 70-mile-per-hour line shots through the middle. Like
He gives up a lot of hard hits.
he does. I mean, he pitches downward. He pitches very low to hitters, and hitters usually look for it. So I mean, they're going to make a little better contact. So I think game 3 advantage goes to Toronto. And honestly, depending on who's Toronto's pitching in Game 4, I think Toronto has the entire advantage in Toronto.
I agree on both accounts because I think that the Rangers' rotation very obviously falls off after 1 and 2 because their 1-2 punch really is one of the best in the league.
I agree. And I think it's probably the best the Rangers have ever had in their entire franchise.
But I also think that with Colby Lewis and Derek Collin being shells of their former self, and even though they did so great in 2011 and 2010, that in all honesty, AJ Griffin's probably going to be the guy. And I think that AJ Griffin, he can be great, but AJ Griffin's stuff is an 88-mile-an-hour fastball and a big slow breaking ball. So he's not a guy who can make a lot of mistakes against these power hitters like Encarnacion, Bautista, and even Smoke. I mean, Smoke has
He hit
power.
that was a lot of home runs.
Yeah, so I think AJ Griffin matches up pretty poorly against the Blue Jays, so I would give them the edge. But I think in Game 5 when it comes back to Texas, I think the Rangers will win in 5.
You have to remember though, AJ Griffin was a first round pick by the A's. This guy knows how to pitch. I think given the opportunity to pitch in a clutch situation like this in a big game, I feel like he could produce, maybe a 2-3 runs in 6 innings and give us a chance against the Blue Jays number 4 starter. I mean, I think he can give us a fair chance over Kobe Lewis or Holland. So that's just my opinion on that.
So let's talk about the Rangers batters. And, well, no, 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 before we do that, let's talk about the pin. Just kind of in general, let's just hit some high points. I think Tony Barnett has been a guy who comes in and strands a lot of runners and comes in when things matter a lot and gets the clutch out in these really desperate, dire situations that are often the products of Ranger relievers or starters walking people. And I think that with Barnett healthy and kind of looking good, that's a big weapon that's back for the Rangers.
That's what I love about John Daniels and the Rangers. I mean, I remember before the season started reading an article about the Rangers scouting Tony Barnett because he's an American who was in the minors and he went to Japan and was a closer in the Japanese league there. And the Rangers scouted him after he played there for 5 years and he had like a 1 and 2 ERAs most of the seasons. I mean, great numbers. And it was interesting to see him pitch through spring training and really do what he's doing now. Pitch great. I mean, he has an ERA of 2.09, 7-3. I mean, he's not. I mean, rookie of the year never goes to a relief pitcher, but if it ever went to a relief pitcher, it should be this guy because 2.03 ERA and 7-3. First year in the league as a relief pitcher is pretty damn impressive.
Yep, and I think that this guy will be instrumental in the playoffs because in the playoffs, managers were way more aggressive with their bullpen. They're not really so much worried about rest getting through the season. So Tony Barnett is going to be a guy who comes in a lot of big situations. I want to talk about Matt Bush, who was a shortstop and converted to pitcher, and now he goes up there and throws gas and has been one of the Rangers' best relievers. Very hard thrower.
He's an interesting story as well as he was in jail or prison for 2 years for a DUI manslaughter charge. And he kind of changed his life around. I mean, he looks like a pretty hardcore guy. He's got some prison tats, I mean, on his arm. But I mean, he came back and he's another guy who's a rookie who's done absolutely amazing. I mean, his average against him, his batter's average against him is a 196. I mean, like you said, he throws gas. We have some pretty hard-throwing some hard-throwing pitchers in our bullpen, but Matt Bush is one of them. And I mean, he throws a pretty hard fastball and four seam in there. But he's been instrumental as well. Him and Barnett, two guys who both interesting stories and that are both rookies. I think they're going to be really instrumental and show off how good they are on national television in these playoffs.
In my eyes, those are the Rangers' best two right-handed arms. I think Jeffress is up there too, and I think Dyson is up there too. What do you think about? I don't even think Dyson's the best reliever right now in the bullpen, even though he's the closer.
I don't think he is either. He might be like second or third, but he's been consistent. He's done good. He's done a really good job in his role as a closer. been doing really good recently, even though his ERA is high for the year. But he's starting to do better, and he throws gas as well. Uh, I think Diekman can figure it out and be decent. And Jeffress, I think, is the key because he's that like third guy in the bullpen. You're like, he's pretty good, but he was a closer for the Brewers this year, and only blew 2 saves, I think. I mean, his ERA was in the twos, but he was doing really good. I mean, he's a good pitcher. So to have him as a seventh inning, eighth inning guy is, I mean, that's a luxury for the Rangers and a steal in that trade to get him and Luke Roy. So once again, I think this roster from 1 to 25 is the best the Rangers have ever had in their entire history. Because this bullpen is it's amazing. At least it has been in the regular season. We'll see how it does in the postseason, but right now they're just doing amazing.
Tanner Scheppers looked awful in the season closer. Are you concerned about him at all, or do you think he'll do well?
I think he'll do well. I don't know if I really hope not, but I don't think Bannister is going to put him in like close game situations. Maybe like when it's a 2 or 3 run lead, maybe give him a little leash. But Tanner Scheppers has done good for the most part. I mean, like you said, his last game was a little bit concerning, but we had already clinched. I mean, there wasn't as much adrenaline pumping. So I think he'll be fine. I think Scheppers, if he's not in such dire roles, I think he'll be fine.
You brought up Alex Claudio, but he's a left-handed pitcher who usually goes in long relief, but he's a guy with that arm angle kind of down by the side that's hard for lefties to pick up. I think he might be used. Yeah, I think when you consider Colby Lewis will probably make the roster, but will probably be like kind of a long man. That means they might be able to use Alex Claudio in more lefty versus lefty or close games because he's been good enough to be used in close games.
Exactly, because even though, I mean, he's 4-1, ERA of 2.79 in 50 innings, batting average against him for 270. I mean, he's got hit against, but you're right. In these lefty-lefty situations, he's a great piece to have on your bench and your bullpen. To just bring out and have another lefty in your arsenal to use against these big, powerful hitters like Justin Smoke, who's a switch hitter. Actually, is he a switch hitter?
Smoke is a switch hitter.
Okay.
I thought he was a lefty too for a long time.
All the lefties on the Blue Jays.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
big potentially in the ALCS. Big Poppy is a guy who hits very well with power from the left side. So, like you said, you want to have those weapons. And let's talk about the offense now. And just to close up on the bullpen, I think this is a damn good-looking bullpen. I think the starting rotation is shakier than the bullpen.
I agree. No, I agree with that completely. It's just going to be interesting how Bannister manages his bullpen in the postseason. Because in the regular season, he's done a pretty good job. The bullpen's it struggled at the beginning, which was unexpected, but throughout the year, it's improved so much as I thought it would. And it's going to be interesting to see how Bannister uses them, because last night we saw how Showalter basically he fucked up. Jack Ben's over there just like jacking off, just like, when am I coming in? Like, when am I coming in, coach?
Well, Ben, he's the closer, so he only comes in for save situations. That's what the managerial anthrax Buck Showalter would have you believe.
Buck Showalter's not the most aggressive coach.
So talking about the Rangers offense, I think that the addition of the Korean Shin-Soo Choo coming back into right field is great to have, and it almost creates this wonderful problem of, okay, I know, but having him as a weapon in general is very good. When you consider like Carlos Gomez, he's been exceptional in the leadoff spot. Chu traditionally, yeah, I think you go with Gomez too, as well as he's been slugging. But I think that you have to really consider Shin-Soo Choo has a great eye. He's a guy who is a nice counterbalance to Rugi Odor, who goes up there and pretty much swings at everything. And I think if you can do it, if you can somehow figure out how to get Chu in the lineup, or if someone goes down with injury, or potentially if a lot of times, they want to be cute in the playoffs, so if they bring in a righty and they want to match up with a nice left-handed contact hitter, Chu is a guy who they can use that for. I'm really, really glad that he's back and his injury healed right before the playoffs started.
I hope he can produce. I mean, he's been kind of bad in these last few games that he played in, but you're right. He's a good person to have, even if he is on the bench.
I think when you look at the rest of the outfield, Gomez definitely getting the start in left field. He was a guy who was on the Astros and really was playing poorly, came over to the Rangers and had some hitting lessons with the Rangers hitting instructor, and his game really took off. He's walking far more, walking far less, and hitting for exceptional power, and he's really a spark plug out there with a lot of speed and defense too.
8 home runs, 24 RBIs, batting 283, I think. I mean, he's done a good job, and I can't blame the Astros because ever since they acquired him trade block or last trade deadline, uh, he was absolutely terrible, off, completely terrible. And I don't blame them for kind of dropping him because he was doing. I would not want him on the Rangers the way he was performing. But ever since he came to the Rangers, he got a new focus, got a new team, new teammates. I mean, he started to experience baseball on a different angle, and I mean, he's produced for it. And I think he deserves a leading starting spot on this team.
It's interesting to note that he was a player who was batting in the low 200s, and he was picked up originally because of that Shin-Soo Choo injury I was speaking about earlier. But after he joined the Rangers and started to take off after those hitting instructions that he got that really helped him improve, he got plugged right into the leadoff spot, which I think is interesting because I think that's a really unique role that a team oftentimes will find one guy and try to stick with them. So he adapted to the leadoff role, which is quintessential to the lineup functioning very well. And he was followed by Ian Desmond, who's batted second for the majority of the year and plays center field. What do you think of Desmond?
Desmond's been one of the key difference makers in this team. I mean, he's played great center field, um, 20 something home runs, 80 something RBIs, that 280. You know, he had a great season. He showed why he wanted money from the Nationals. The Rangers gave him a 1 year, $10 million deal. I think he likes it in Texas. I hope he stays, but he's been instrumental at home games. I mean, he's had such a great season playing in Arlington. And I think he's going to be a big reason if the Rangers win these next few games at home, because that's where he's produced the most, and I really hope he can replicate that in game 1 and 2.
Desmond is top 5 in the league in multi-hit games, and he has one of the best averages at home. I think that'll be really important in games 1 and 2, like you said. Nomar Mazara, one of our favorites, is a guy who, the Big Chill, he's this young guy, 21, rookie, leads the league in RBIs amongst rookies, and he's gone out there and played consistently well. He's shown a good eye. He's played pretty good defense. Usually he'll get. I think Mazara is a guy who in the playoffs is probably going to get defensively replaced a lot. We're going to see Hoying.
He's a liability in the field, but he has the fifth most RBIs this year for the Rangers as a rookie.
Yeah.
I mean, 64 RBIs. I mean, 20 home runs, batted 266. I mean, 145 games. Great season. I mean, but I agree with you. Defensively, he is a big liability. He's like a Nelson Cruz out there again. And that scares me because seeing him in right field reminds me of Nelson Cruz, just deja vu. Like, I don't want to see him. I'd rather have Gomez. I'd rather have Beltran in right field. I'd rather have no, he made a great sliding catch the other day.
I remember that. Yeah.
I think he has more experience than a 21-year-old.
Yeah.
So,
I
it'll be interesting to see how they use him.
yeah,
Zara.
I think the issue with the Rangers here is that ideally you would want to start Chu in right, Desmond in center, and Gomez in left, and DH Mazara. But you have the Beltran you have to put in. He's exceptional. So then you have these two outfielders that you would kind of prefer to DH. So the Rangers can kind of play matchups here, I think, specifically with Chu and Mazara, I think, are the two that are going to get swapped in and around the most.
Yeah, I agree.
So going over to third base, Adrian Beltre, Gold Glover, has one of the best averages with runners in scoring position, one of the best averages in the last 3 innings of the game. He's one of the main reasons the Rangers have won one-run games, his defense and his clutch hitting. It's not just this random lucky thing where the Rangers win a bunch of run-one games. It's players like Adrian Beltre who have been clutch, players like Ian Desmond who have been clutch, players like Carlos Beltran who have had a whole career of performing under pressure, and Elvis Andrus, who's top 10 in the league in batting and has quite frankly had a career year after screwing the pooch in the ALDS last year.
Yeah.
And I think another guy you have to point out is Rutan Odor. Of course, he is specifically rivals with Jose Bautista. Odor is the guy that threw the punch. Odor has hit for great power all year. His only real weakness is his defense and his inability to walk. But he's kind of a Vlad Guerrero type where there's a lot of personality, a lot of talent, and he's a free swinging guy, and he's a fun guy to watch too.
He really is. I mean, as a Ranger fan, after that punch to Bautista, there's no way you can't love him. He had a 30 home run season as a second baseman. I mean, that's impressive. 33 home runs, 88 RBIs, and a 271. 135 strikeouts was a lot only compared to 19 walks. But he's an exciting player to watch. He plays with emotion. Honestly, if he played for another team, I'd probably hate the fuck out of him. I mean, I would probably hate Odor if he played for another team, but when he's on your team, I love him. I mean, he's great. I mean, and he's produced for the money that we're paying him right now. It's almost criminal. I mean, to see how much money we're giving him and how much he's producing for us. I mean, he's not getting enough yet. I mean, he will eventually, but man, he's doing such a great job.
I think one thing the Rangers have to be concerned with is Mitch Moreland, who is a streaky hitter who's in a huge rut right now. Do you think that Ryan Rua could potentially get a start if things go awry early on in the series?
Maybe. I think Bannister might lean on Moreland's experience in the playoffs. But you're right. He has been in a rut. I mean, he's got a 233 this year. Another 20 home run season, 22 home runs, 66 RBIs. But he's kind of just had another down year. I mean, his average has just kind of explained it all. I mean, he strikes out a lot. He walks decently, but not enough to where it really matters. Especially whenever he's bad in the batting order. So I Rua could produce more. I trust Rua more offensively. He's got some power, but I don't know if Bannister would do that. It'll be interesting to see if he will.
To me, Mitch Moreland always feels like he's on the verge of breaking out. For instance, 2 months ago when he was on one of his upswings, it seemed as though he kind of learned to get his average to like 265 and stabilize it and hit for pretty good power. And that's the kind of thing that Mitch Moreland needs to do. Mitch Moreland as a player should be aiming to be good defensively, which he is, but then hit about 265 with those power numbers, and then you're a perfectly serviceable first baseman. The problem is Moreland will have good streaks like that, but then he'll go on these horrific slides where he'll just put up offers night after night after night. He'll hit right into the shift every single time. He'll be god-awful versus left-handed pitching, and he'll just be a black hole in the lineup. And I think against lefties, you bet your ass Ryan Rua is going to get that start, because Rua's average versus lefties is over 50 points higher than it is versus righties. He's really hit lefties well this year. So I bet Rua's starting against J.A. If Mitch Moreland does poorly in Game 1, I would expect Ryan Rua to start in Game 2 against J.A. Happ.
He's smart. I agree.
I think Jonathan LaCroix is another guy who's proven over and over that he can be clutch, and a guy who's hit for a lot of power on the Rangers offense, and he really helps shore up a significant weak point in Robinson Chirinos for the Rangers, because Chirinos, just simply put, doesn't have the offensive numbers to be starting on a playoff roster.
It's a lot better than having Lucroy and Chirinos as the backup and having Bobby Wilson. I mean, no offense to Bobby Wilson. He passed up the catcher position for us, but Lucroy has been such an instrumental acquisition. He still has another year on a team option for the Rangers with and I think we're obviously going to pick it up. The way he's handled the pitchers is absolutely amazing. His offense with the Rangers has been amazing. He's been clutch. He's been he's been involved with the team. He's been a charismatic guy. I mean, he's great trade because we got not just a great player, but a great person too. He's a good guy. I mean, he truly cares about the game and watches a lot of film. So I think Lucroy is going to be a big part of the series, the way he handles the pitching staff, even more than his offense.
The story of Jonathan Lucroy is that the Rangers knew, just as we discussed, that starting pitching might be a little bit of a weak point. So they went out and tried to shop for starting pitching. White Sox ace Chris Sale, one of their main targets. But they realized every single team offering starting pitching was asking an absurd amount. So instead what they did was went out and got the best defensive catcher in the league and a guy that hits very well too. And they think that LaCroix, through his ability to call the game and his literal defensive ability, yeah, he thinks that helped all of the pitching roster as a whole almost more than getting just one more good pitcher would have done.
I think it has, and that's such a brilliant move by the front office, the Rangers, because like you said, I mean, it was absurd amounts that teams were asking for their top aces, and the next best thing was to get a player that not, is going to pitch every 5 games or pitch in your bullpen, but a guy who's going to be on the field 5 to 6 days every week playing catcher with all of your pitchers, making them better. I mean, it worked. I mean, it has worked, and Lucroy's done such a fabulous job handling, not only our aces and our mid-rotation guys, but also all of those talented guys in the bullpen that throw gas. I mean,
Like Jeffress.
Kalash, Sheppers, Diekman, Dyson. I mean, Bush, Barnett. I mean, dude, our entire bullpen throws at least 95 above almost. I mean, it's ridiculous. So, perfect acquisition. I can't give the Rangers front office enough credit for that.
That was a really good trade, I agree. Now let's just, before we touch on the Blue Jays and then conclude the video, I want to touch on Beltran, Profar, and DeShields. I think DeShields mostly is going to make the roster for his speed, and I really think that's a huge asset because if the Rangers get into a one-run situation in the ninth, having him as a pitch runner will be huge.
Speed and defense. Because that speed, he can be, a center fielder, right fielder, someone that can give you some better defense, in the late innings. So yeah, that and base running, I think will obviously make the roster.
I think Jurickson Profar has kind of been a little hit or miss this year, and
Yeah, I agree. Bland. I don't know.
he hits. I think it's whenever he hits right-handed, he hits for like no power at all because he's a switch hitter. Yeah, he's one of those switch hitters who is pretty much awful from one side, and he's done virtually nothing from that side of the plate this year. So I don't really foresee him getting very much playing time. But I think Carlos Beltran is a guy who can come up big in situations that matter. He usually bats right in the middle of the lineup. He gets that DH nod. What do you think about Beltran?
Beltran is a proven veteran. He knows what he's doing. 39 years old. Still maybe had an amazing season this year. Still played the outfield. I expect him to do what he's always done in the playoffs and just completely rig. I mean, I think he's going to hit the power. I think he's going to get some walks. I think Beltran is a player that is going to make a pretty big difference or a pretty big impact on this series. I hope.
Yeah. All right. Let's launch into the Blue Jays briefly here, and just let's hit the high notes on their team. We've already talked about the pitching, but I think you have to talk about Edwin Encarnacion. He has one of the highest home run totals out of anyone this year.
He's really good. I mean, their 3, 4, 5 is absolutely amazing with Donaldson, Encarnacion, and Bautista. I mean, that's just such a powerful combination. And they still have Justin Smoke, and it's a powerful combination. And just like it was last year, whenever those guys come up consecutively, you're just holding your breath the entire time, hoping they don't, hit a home run or a double or anything. I mean, they're just such a dangerous lineup, just like the Rangers. So they have some pop. I think the entire thing is going to come down to the Blue Jays starting pitching, honestly.
What does Josh Donaldson bring to the table?
Great defense, power, hit 30 something home runs this season. He was the MVP of the AL last year. Has a lot of playoff experience in these past two seasons. I mean, he's a proven player. I mean, and I think he was one of the just how trades to be respected. I think Josh Donaldson kind of earned the same expectation as other Rangers get because he's one of the best in the league, I believe.
Troy Tulo is a guy who was an all-star for many years, and he's probably gone downhill a bit since his Colorado Rocky days. He's still good, though.
No, he is. His defense is good. He hits a good average. His power kind of decreased. He gets hit home runs, but he's a good solid player. The best thing about him is that he's clutch.
I think, of course, let's end the video. Bautista, one of the best power hitters in the league, probably the most hated in the league by many. What do you think?
I absolutely hate Jose Bautista. I think he's arrogant. I think he's a shit. But even though I think that, I still have to believe and know that he's a phenomenal player. I mean, he hits amazing contact, and he rarely ever strikes out. Has a great eye. Hits so much power. Such a powerful guy. I mean, he makes contact that looks like a pop-up that sometimes is a home run. I mean, he's just that kind of powerful kind of guy. And he's pompous. He's loud. He likes to make a little bit of noise. But he's a player to be feared. I mean, I hate him, but I still have to respect him as a player. He's a player that I fear every time he steps in that batter's box. So I pray to God that he goes 0 for 25 with 25 strikeouts. I mean, that's my prayer.
Well, I think the Rangers will take this one in 5, and the 3 wins will be at home. Would you like to give a final prediction before we close out the video?
I think they'll win it in 4. I think they'll win the first game tomorrow, lose the second one, and then I think they'll win both games in Toronto.
That's interesting. Okay, follow him at Pink Floyd Boy, follow me at Venomous Stare, and subscribe to the channel for more.